When they became the boys to beat, obviously it was their product that was in large part responsible, and a lot of people wanted a product built by them.
The enterprising young John soon capitalized on his racing reputation. At age 18, he moved his shop to the old tannery directly across the street from his parents' house to accommodate the numerous orders for small boats he was receiving. This unauspicious building would become the site of the world-renowned Herreshoff Manufacturing Company. John's clients spread the word of the fine craftsmanship his business achieved. As the enterprise prospered, John expanded the tannery. It's hard to imagine that a blind young man could be so successful in building boats. When a boat of complexity was ordered, John asked Nat to do the designing. Nat attended MIT for mechanical engineering and was employed at the Corliss Steam Engine Company in Providence, Rhode Island. So impressed with Nat, Corliss put the young employee in charge of setting up and running their mammoth steam engine at the Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia in 1876.
In Nat's spare time and on weekends, all the time he was at Corliss, he had been designing for John. John had tried to get Nat to come with him for a period of years and was somewhat unsuccessful at this. His coming with John certainly would mean that he would have to take a reduction in his pay, a slight reduction, but nonetheless a reduction. I think he was reluctant to come in the beginning, but I think John probably painted a rosy picture of the future, and he and Nat reached a gentleman's agreement.
In 1877, John obtained some good orders for fair-sized vessels and was anxious for me to join him, and so I did. After he agreed to my precepts, which in outline were to attend strictly and fully to our own business, to improve quality in every way of our products, not to borrow money for capital, nor spend money on the plant until we had earned it, and let our advertising be the work we have turned out.
Well, evidently, after they'd had quite a lot of business and made some profits, they decided to just build a boat on their own. The Stiletto was built very lightly with elegant new machinery, boilers and engines, and they proved her out by laying in wait in the Hudson River for the famous Hudson River steamer Mary Powell. The Mary Powell proudly went every day from New York to Albany and was dubbed the fastest vessel in the world. So when the Mary Powell came along, the Stiletto piled on steam, and they were able to pass the Mary Powell. And just to make it clear, Captain Nat steered across the bow of the Mary Powell, slowed, went down the other side, went around the stern, and then they charged on to Albany and got there 10 minutes before the Mary Powell. Well, this was a sensation, and all the New York papers wrote about it. It was free advertising. And Jay Gould, who owned the shipping line, was quite annoyed, and he kind of railed against the Herreshoffs in the newspaper, so it was the best kind of publicity. I suppose almost more than anything, the Stiletto was what brought fame to this company.
The Herreshoff Manufacturing Company's reputation for building fast vessels was largely due to Captain Nat's use of innovative technology to produce strong, lightweight hulls. This New York 50-class sailboat called Spartan represents the extreme degree of design refinement the HMC achieved in creating a high strength-to-weight ratio. Marine engineer Ed McClave spent 2 years studying and rebuilding the hull on Spartan.
The New York 50s, which this boat is one of, were ordered in 1912 in the fall, and were built in the winter of 1912 and 1913, and they went sailing in the early summer of 1913, 9 of them. They were built here at the Herreshoff Manufacturing Company in an assembly line fashion. They were not the only boats that were built that year. There was other work going on in the yard. The hulls were built upside down, the way one would build a 12-foot dinghy. And they were passed from one place in the yard to another. People put the frames over the molds, and they moved on, and the people who put the planks on and the guys who were doing the frames did some more frames. The boats moved down an assembly line, and they went out the door. The size of the frames, the size of the floor timbers, the size of the deck beams, the thickness of the planking are much smaller than would have been customary in boats of this size, and that was a trademark of the Herreshoff construction. It achieved a very light hull. With a very light hull, you can have a lot of ballast. And this boat is about 50% ballast. The lead ballast casting under it is approximately half the weight of the boat. And that allows the boat to carry a lot of sail. The ballast keeps the boat from heeling over, and the more ballast you have, the more sail you can have without heeling the boat over. So these boats are very fast.
Credit to the HMC's ability to revolutionize yacht construction must be given to the unique working relationship John and Nat had achieved. The differences in their personalities suited their positions in running the company.
What developed was the perfect partnership where the brothers had great faith in each other, and they were both, I think, very pleased with the division of responsibility where John would get the jobs and run the operation, but Captain Nat would design all the vessels.
Each had his own area of expertise, and each had his area of concentration, and there was no crossing. John had his great strength in finances and the ability to, remarkable ability for a man who was unsighted to keep the economic side of the company in his head totally. And the benefit of this is that it relieved N.G. Herreshoff from even thinking about this, which maybe would have been a burden to his creative career. He was the creative one. He was the design genius. Nat's work was here at the yard, supervising design and construction, and of course carrying through on all of the products of his own mind. Everything was generated from Nat's mind, which is a remarkable.
He made tours twice a day around the entire yard to check on the work and to modify the direction of the work as needed.
They were able to put out the finest product imaginable because it was a project that had been attended to by the man who conceived it at every single day.
He was apt to carry around with him in his pocket a little tiny stub of a pencil, and he would just take a little slip of paper, or maybe you can imagine even the back of some sandpaper or something, and he would make a little sketch like that of what changes he wanted.
From the initial inspiration to its completion, whether it was a special block or whether it was a cup defender, the concept began in his mind and slid down his ways, and he had his finger on it during the entire period.
That total control by one man is what makes this company unique.
Nat's creative control existed only because John could single-handedly run the company.
He had the mental ability, even though he was blind, to do all the estimating. He just did it in his head. It's incredible that compared to the modern day computers and complicated techniques of estimating a job, J.B. would just do it in a quiet room in his head.
He could calculate, it's my understanding that he could calculate the price of something as complex as a gunboat for, say, the Spanish government in something like a half hour.
In one instance, while traveling in England, Nat sent a letter to John describing the size and shape of a boat they would have bid for. From the description of no more than a few sentences, John sent back the exact price for the boat.
At one time, he ordered a brand new large piece of machinery, and he had worked out in his mind how it would be taken into the shop. But when the machinery arrived, the foreman and the men couldn't fit it through the door. And finally, they sheepishly went to J.B., and he grabbed his cane, which was marked off with divisions for measuring, and he went right out there and he remeasured the doorway and he measured the machine. And for a blind man to be doing this was remarkable. And he quickly figured out how the machine would be able to get in the door. And he told them how, and they turned it that way and they got it right in.
As the Industrial Revolution marched on, a handful of men, the captains of industry, were making an extraordinary amount of money.
The New York Tribune in 1892 tried to compile a list of all the millionaires in America and came up with a total of 4,047. There were men who made fortunes, for example, inventing a new kind of plumbing valve, or inventing Vaseline, or inventing any number of products that now could be sold to a market that no one had ever dreamed of even 30 years earlier. There's always been people with money in America, but there had never been so many with so much of it in so short a time.